The way I look at data is if you've got the underlying data structures right, the monetizable bit is everything else on top of that.
Yep.
The monetizable bit's not the data structures. That should really be there for everybody to use.
So, George, CEO of AutoTrader South Africa. I heard there's quite an interesting story behind that, behind your journey.
Have you been talking to Lee again?
Lee's been telling me things, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Presume I know nothing, though.
Okay.
But no, it's been genuinely a really interesting journey, hasn't it?
Yeah. The last 15, 16 years has been a bit of a roller coaster. We were a print magazine, and now we're a digital business.
Focusing on that side of things, that's a big switch, isn't it? Going from print to digital. What part did you play in that?
All of it. So every auto trader in the world has pretty much done this move. And people think there's this cookie cutter approach, and there isn't. The UK auto trader did it in a very different way to what the auto trader in the US did it, and did it in a very different way to what we did it. So, it's very market specific. You think you can look at a first world country, or you can look at another country, and you can say, we'll just do that, and you forget the nuance, and then you get yourself into trouble. So we try to learn the lessons from the UK story. We try to learn the lessons from the US story. And I think one of the most important things is building relationships.
Yep.
And in those relationships, you then learn how people do things. You take your local situation and you apply those lessons. And in a nutshell, our transition from being a print business to being a digital business was different to anywhere else in the world.
Okay. In what sense was it different?
In that South Africa moved, I'd say, a lot more slowly than other countries in the world. So we got our CCOM cable to our shores, which we call it the CCOM cable, which was the internet pipe, for lack of a better term, to our shores, and we suddenly then got high-speed internet. And you can see a definite correlation between that line and the acceleration of internet speed and internet user adoption. I mean, today we're sitting with about 31 million internet users in South Africa, and that curve was very steep and very closely correlated to internet speed. And in the early years, I think because of internet speed and that curve gradually growing, people switched from print to digital slower than in the UK. In the UK and the US, the internet wasn't there, and then it was there. You got dial-up, but it progressed very rapidly. In South Africa, it wasn't exactly the case. Yeah, we were behind the rest of the world, and so I think our transition, the main difference was that we transitioned a lot slower. It took us about 10 years.
Yeah, it's a decade of a transition, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think we've had similar problems over here, like with the print industry, not just in the auto trade, but a lot of print magazines and newspapers in particular were slow to adopt because they didn't really look far enough ahead. Do you think you guys did that? Do you think you had the foresight to be ready for
We
digital?
did have the foresight, but so if you imagine the South Africa, we didn't get fiber to the home until about a couple of years ago. Okay. We didn't have fiber to the home. We relied mostly on mobile 3G and mobile broadband. And the other problem was that it was expensive. So while we had the line to our shores, the infrastructure inside the country and the last mile infrastructure particularly was very expensive. We only had two major players in telecoms, and prices are till today still relatively high, and I think that slowed things down as well. So so as prices came down and as internet speeds rose, so user adoption accelerated, but it took 10 years.
Yeah, it's a long time, isn't it?
Yeah,
long time. What other challenges did you encounter in those 10 years?
one particular challenge, which I think is a phenomenon or a principle or something that every single industry suffers from, and that is, for some reason, the industry always lags the consumer. So we see user adoption change. We see the internet being used by the consumer, and everybody in an industry is also a consumer. But for some reason, the car dealer lagged.
Okay. What reason do you think that is? Have you got an idea of what that might have been?
I think businesses and corporate businesses or even entrepreneurial businesses don't want to change fast enough. So we change as consumers very fast, but businesses don't change very fast for some reason. But we're all consumers inside that business, so it's a bit of an oxymoron, if you ask me.
Yeah, you should be able to use your own experience, shouldn't you, to drive forward.
Exactly. So that was one of the other challenges was we had to really bring the car dealer on the journey rather than the car dealer seeing the internet as a platform to reach another market.
And how did you bring them along that journey? What did you find much resistance to that?
Yeah. In the beginning, we did. So one of our Achilles' heels was we would in the print or magazine days, we would go out and take photographs of cars for dealers to do ads. We would apply resource to creating the adverts for them, and the magazine could only house probably between 6, 7, 8, maybe 10,000 cars.
Okay.
Whereas we could on the internet, that's limitless.
Yeah.
So our ability to go and photograph all the cars in the country for sale at scale was impossible. So we had to move the business along and then begin to ask the car dealer to provide us with the photographs and the advert.
Yeah.
And that was one of the biggest leaps was to change that kind of historical way of doing things. Like I always did it this way. You always sent a photo agent. You always took the photographs for me. Well, we can't do that at scale unless we, employ another 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 folds worth of people.
Yeah.
Then we could do it at scale, and then it's going to be inefficient because we don't know your business.
Yeah.
So we had to scale back on that part of the business and get the car dealer to switch the way in which they created the ads, or the ads were created for them.
And it's very hard to do that, isn't it? When you haven't got any, it's very hard to prove what the net result of that might be until they start to get sales through.
Yeah, well, because of the slow transition, so we tracked the consumer and how they were responding to car ads, and as we tracked the transition of the consumer responding via digital platforms or responding via the print magazine, we communicated that to the dealer. We said to the car dealers, 50% of your response is actually coming from digital, because we had 100% penetration. We still have 100% penetration of Call Tracker. And we were fortunate to have done that early in about 2007, 2008. And today that's one of the ways in which we do business. We put the dealer through our call tracking system, and we've got 100% penetration. Yeah. So we were able to put a different number on the internet and another number on in the magazine, and that's how we tracked how the consumer was transitioning at the lowest possible point in the funnel. Communicating that back to the dealer, a lot of our customers were still fixated on print.
Right. Okay.
Even although they got the data.
Yeah. Again, that's because they're just so used to it, and it's a decade-old tradition, isn't it? A long time. So
businesses find it hard to change.
They do, yeah. Not just in this industry either, to be honest.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've got a lot of listeners, or mainly listeners, from the UK market. Tell us a bit about the South African market. What's it like?
In what context? In terms of buying and selling cars?
Yeah, start there. Yeah, in terms of being a car buyer in a South African market.
A car buyer. In the South African market, it's not advisable to buy and sell cars privately because of the risk, unless you get a safe environment to do so. There are ways in which you can keep yourself safer if you want to buy or sell a car privately. Things like meet in a location that's safe, that is gated, that's got security. Don't hand over your papers of your car. Don't put yourself at risk. So buying a car in South Africa is by and large dealer to consumer.
Okay.
Not by and large consumer to consumer. It's by and large dealer to consumer. So So from a market point of view, dealers are the ones that basically create the industry.
And that's a benefit for them, really, isn't it? In
Yeah.
a roundabout sort of way. What challenges, besides the like you say, the used car market, what challenges do dealerships face in the South African trade?
I think data is one of the biggest challenges, particularly car valuation. One of the biggest challenges is how much do I trade a car in for, and how much can I sell that car for? Those are the two biggest conundrums that actually start the transaction, and that's because of the market not moving fast enough when it comes to the underlying data structures that we spoke about previously.
Yep.
Those underlying data structures, if they're not there, it's very difficult to get your handle on a value of a car. And so how much do I buy this car for?
Is that the same for a dealer as it is for a private seller, for example? Yeah. What do we have to do to get
even more so for a private seller.
Yeah.
Because AutoTrader provides now that we've got the data structure sorted out, we provide valuation tools to the car dealer, but that hasn't extended to the consumer yet.
No. And we were talking earlier, weren't we, about your the considerable work you've done on the VIN database.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us a bit more about that again? So in terms of where that started and the net result of that.
Yeah. So the UK and America, you've got data stores which I believe is largely government driven. So as you register a car or change ownership, you've got very efficient systems which come with decades and decades of having a proper postal service, having proper license and registration processes. We don't have the same thing in South Africa, and pretty much I don't know if Africa's got is any better, to be honest. I think South Africa's probably leading on this. And those data structures traditionally have been very messy. So corporate businesses have had to build their own databases, and we were no different. So we realized that even in other corporate businesses in South Africa, the data was messy. The VIN databases were messy. So we took it on ourselves to build our own. So it took us about 5 years to build a really solid VIN database.
Yeah.
And dealers didn't understand why we wouldn't accept feeds into the platform. For years and years and years, we wouldn't accept feeds into the platform. And the main reason was dirty data.
Okay.
And at the time, to explain that is very difficult. It's very difficult at the time. And, you look like, you don't, you're not an open platform. You don't accept feeds in. And why does everyone else accept feeds in? Only now, when you've got hindsight 2020 and you look back and you realize the clean data that AutoTrader sits with, can you explain, well, that's the reason why. Now you give us a VIN number, we'll list the car, and it'll be squeaky clean.
Yeah, and how does that translate into a day-to-day operation in a dealership? So do they have access to that data now?
No. Well, they don't have access to the data by and large.
Okay.
If they advertise on AutoTrader's platform, we've got the underlying data structure sorted. So the advert on our platform is perfect.
Yep.
But everywhere else is still messy.
Absolutely. It's a worry, really, isn't it? I think it's the big data thing again, isn't it? We talk quite a bit about this on the show.
Well, I mean, the way I look at data is if you've got the underlying data structures right, the monetizable bit is everything else on top of that.
Yep.
The monetizable bit's not the data structures. That should really be there for everybody to use. The monetizable bit are the behaviors and the interactions with that data structure. So how do people search based on make, model, variant, equipment? What does demand and supply look like on top of that? What does pricing look like on top of that? All that data is monetizable.
Yep.
The underlying data structure shouldn't be monetized.
No.
That's like monetizing your ID number.
Yeah. It's just the base layer, isn't it, that you work from. How can dealerships use data more comprehensively? In South Africa, for example, do you think they're collecting data they're simply not using, or what's your experience with that?
I think, we mentioned earlier that is data being misused. I think that maybe the wrong term. I think there's missed opportunity. The missed opportunity is we're sitting on a lot of data that's not being used.
Yep.
And one of the reasons it's not being used is because we still don't know how to make sense of it. We've just got so much coming at us that we've got to sort ourselves out in terms of how we use it.
Where do you start, I suppose? It's overwhelming, particularly for smaller or even medium-sized businesses, I'm guessing, really.